And we're live with his Jeffness, Jeff Miller, to review an episode of Homicide Life on the Street that I think is called In Search of Crimes Past.
You're correct.
Now, Jeff, when do you want me to give my rating for this? Do you want me to give it right at the end?
I suppose.
Okay, it's up to you.
Why? Are you itching to get it out or something?
Well, no, it's just I will please you. This is when I release it.
Okay.
The slight spoiler, it's not 0 and it's not 1.
Well, that's good.
No.
I'm glad to hear that.
Eh.
Okay. In Search of Crimes Past aired originally April 14th, 1995 on NBC. It was episode 18 of season 3.
The real 18th episode.
Yeah. The episode opens with a reporter outside a penitentiary with protesters surrounding the area when a man is set to be executed for a murder that took place 16 years ago. A young lady walks into the precinct and asks for Detective Bolander. Later, this same young lady takes Colonel Barnfather hostage. Turns out this young lady is the daughter of the man on death row. She claims her father is innocent and demands that the execution be stopped. G tells Bolander to reopen the case involving the man on death row. Bolander was the primary in the case 16 years ago. Are we being attacked?
Yeah, you'll have to say that bit again, Jeff.
Which bit?
No, the bit.
The bit where you mentioned the woman coming into the office. That's the bit from there onwards.
Okay. The young lady is the daughter of the man on death row. She claims her father is innocent and demands that the execution be stopped. G tells Bolander to reopen the case involving the man on death row. Bolander was the primary in the case 16 years ago. Reluctantly, Bolander, Munch, Felton, and Howard head to the old building with old case records to try to dig up some information. Meanwhile, Lewis investigates an apparent suicide that a homeless man witnessed. The medical examiner tells Lewis the entry wound is consistent with that of a suicide. Lewis then wonders why the man decided to take his own life. Hamilton and Bayless investigate the death of a woman in her 70s found in a bathtub. Although most signs point to a death of natural causes, Bayless thinks foul play is involved. Upon further investigation, it is revealed that the elderly man has been seeing another woman and later admits to killing his grumpy wife. Lewis is upset with Munch after he hires an elderly bartender without consulting him or Bayless. Munch soon regrets hiring this bartender, who ends up being a costly investment. Lewis storms into the precinct with information that Bolander will find very useful. It turns out the man who committed suicide, which his name was Jeffrey Zwick, was suffering from guilt. In his suicide note, he mentions being responsible for the murder that the man now being executed was charged for. Bolander seeks closure and sets out to find out what went wrong in this investigation of years past. Finds out that a bartender omitted a key piece of information at the time. This recap seems to be written by somebody who doesn't remember any of the names of the characters involved other than the main characters, because they don't say any of them. Anyway, that's the recap. Do you want me to read the David Morris review, or you want?
Oh yes, David Morris. Yes. But one moment. I remember thinking at this. Oh, wouldn't it be great if he stayed on his cat? And then I just remembered right now. Hang on a minute. He was already busy. He was doing a little show called Seinfeld, wasn't he, Jeff? At the same time.
Who, Jerry Stiller?
Yes. Because he was Frank Costanza's dad.
I can't remember when he actually started on Seinfeld, but I think he'd already been on by then. Because I know Seinfeld started in the early 90s, so it was running concurrently.
Well, yeah, they had like a little short season that started in '89.
Right. I can't remember what his first appearance as George's dad was, because I know that they recast.
They replaced. Yeah. Jerry Stone was much. The original father was maybe have been up to like the third season, but it won't. And he also recast Seinfeld's father as well. We've got Bernie Martin.
By the time this Homicide episode aired, though, it was '95. I'm pretty sure he had been on by then on Seinfeld. Yeah.
I tell you, I'd be open to be reviewing Seinfeld episodes because they're popular. We'd get some flipping viewers for them.
True. So, do you
Oh
want
yes,
me
David, what's he called? David Morris,
yeah,
BB2K.
David B226 Morris. By by the time we finish reviewing all 7 seasons of Homicide, maybe you'll remember his little screen name, but maybe not.
Hopefully.
So I can't tell. Are you showing pictures on the screen? I don't have that up, so I don't know.
Yeah. I've got pictures. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll try to pick a picture that matches what's being said.
Okay, because I can't tell when I go back into the app. I just see a black screen. So
Okay.
okay, so let me go back to Safari then. All right. Here's what Mr. Morris says. During its run, Homicide let a lot of reasonably well-known directors like John McNaughton, Gary Flater, and Catherine Bigelow take turns behind the camera. However, they almost never let any guest writers take turns for the show. This is hardly surprising because most TV producers, with very few exceptions, Michael Crichton for ER is the most obvious one, it is very difficult for a famous screenwriter or novelist to write for a show with its own style. So it's strange that the show would hire a famous writer. It's even stranger when the famous writer is Jane Smiley. Though admittedly a brilliant writer, none of her most famous books, including Moo, Separate Keys, and the Pulitzer Prize-winning A Thousand Acres, have anything to do with violence or crime, certainly not homicide. It would have made more sense to invite someone like Patricia Cromwell or P.D. James. But it soon becomes very clear that Smiley knew the characters and plots of Homicide very well. Indeed, her script is so reminiscent of the old-school show that it's pretty hard to believe that Tom Fontana or James O'Shamura didn't have anything to do with it. It's true that what we have seems like a trumped-up situation when the daughter of a man on death row takes Colonel Barnfather hostage and demands that the investigating detective, Bolander, reopen the case and find her father's evidence. But it is done very much in the show's style. For one thing, we never see Barnfather held hostage or inside the room itself. For another, normal police work doesn't screech to a halt as it did in the White Glove murders or the police shooting. Bayliss and Pendleton are still out investigating a suspicious death, and Lewis is investigating a suicide. And third, though the detectives are concerned, they aren't moved or paralyzed by grief. This is especially clear when they start joking about Barnfather's nerve or whether it would have been better for Granger to have been taken hostage. Furthermore, the crisis of the episode is resolved before the show is half over. Even before we learn that the clock is ticking on an innocent man, the detectives have gotten the evidence of innocence and a judicial stay in only a few hours. More important than the man on death row is the man who put him there. Ned Beatty goes through a very well-done performance, one which in many ways is as good as the previous episode. First, Stan is absolutely sure that he has put the right man in jail, and it comes as a great shock to him when Meldrick shows up with a confession by another man for the same murder. In a typical show of thoroughness, after the wrong man is set free, he spends the next half of the episode trying to figure out how the real killer knew the victim. He then finds out a motive that the murderer would have, and when he confronts a witness about this, he is put in the place when the witness replies that he didn't ask the right question. This is a sad truth that sets the detective back. One wonders if this investigation might... Okay, I'm going to skip that because it's a little bit of a spoiler.
Okay.
Bayliss and Pendleton, in the meantime, catch a murder case that is even more bizarre than the usual one. For one thing, it seems to involve the accidental drowning of a 74-year-old woman. It seemed to be one to write off, but Bayliss thinks there's more to this case. Indeed, it turns out that this is a crime of passion, very old passion. When he was in high school, Sam O'Donnell was involved with a woman named Isabella Kunkel, but with the coming of World War II, he left her behind. Eventually, he married a woman and was faithful to her for 50 years. But he still loved Isabel, and when she comes back into his life, he finds that his marriage didn't mean as much as he thought. Because the case involves a really old love triangle, there is a kind of bittersweet tone to everything. When Tim learns that Mrs. O'Donnell was murdered, he and Frank are very reluctant to take the killer in. We mourn not just for the life that has been lost, but the relationship that could never be. About the only wrong note that Smiley hits is that Tim and Frank are far more companionable than usual. They even talk about their first loves, something that I can't see the tough Hamilton doing willingly. Of course, the mood is shattered when Frank points out to Tim the last time he made a fool of himself over a woman, but still it seems a little false. This is particularly... Okay, I'm not going to read that spoiler either. The show also has a lot of quirky humor that Homicide possessed. We have a suicide victim giving away his shoes to a homeless man before turning the gun on himself. We have the jokes over the hostage situation, and most evidently we see Munch's futile attempts to improve the bar by hiring quite possibly the most incompetent bartender in Baltimore. His attempts to improve the waterfront end with the bar wrecked and a huge loss of money. It is especially funny because this particular bartender has perfectionist standards that he is absolutely unable to meet. Jerry Stiller continues the Homicide tradition of having comedians make potent appearances, though this is more comic than serious. Jane Smiley has never written another teleplay, certainly not another Homicide. It's a great pity. This unlikely author understood how the show really worked. This is a gift of a great writer, that he or she can raise the brilliance out of a medium that he or she has no real experience in. My score 9.
But you see,
So what did you think, Jim?
She didn't write the story though.
Yeah.
But the credit is sort of at odds with what he's talking about. I mean, the story is set by these two. She wrote the teleplay, and as you know, in TV they beat things out. They're sort of like, you know, like what happens, basically what happens in every scene with the various beats. Because that's usually what happens in the writer's room is...
Yeah, there's obviously a lot of input from everybody that's, you know, involved with the show. So...
Yeah, it depends on some shows where it's less... where it's more... confined, less... there's different things on different shows. You know more about this than I do for this show. One thing that was weird to me is the choice that this actor made. Because at this point, because he acts this well, but maybe he's acting the wrong thing. Because at this point, this actor is acting a man who has lost his wife. But, you know, he's acting as if it was a surprise to him. He's not acting a guilty man who's hiding it. But maybe the risk in doing that would have looked like that he was a bad actor. And he didn't want to look like a bad actor.
Well, maybe the character really was a good actor.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I mean, that's another...
He was a poker player, and he's used to the you know, fooling his friends playing poker.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, there are people like that. I mean, I would think, what a natural. He should be. That character should be an actor. But yeah, the good liars do exist. Right. What else? Right. Let's think about the. Yeah, I'm glad they actually avoided all of the actual hostage situation itself. Right, then we've got hair. Right, so is this Barnard Hughes? Who's that? Is that the old fella?
Yeah. Yeah,
right.
He's and he died in 2006, but he, you know, did a ton of things over the years.
Well, he acted well in this.
Yeah. And I actually can't remember the first thing I saw him in, because I remember there was at least one TV show that he was a regular on that I watched, but I'm going blank. I'm looking through his credits really quick, and I'm not seeing it. But it may have just been I saw him in enough movies that I remembered him from those. But I was thinking there was a TV show that he was a regular in, but I can't remember what it was now, and I'm not seeing it when I look real quickly through his parts. But then there's a lot of stuff on here, so it's and they could have missed something too.
Right. So for the STs out there, this is Heckler & Koch MP5 submachine gun. Now owned by British Aerospace, or rather BAE Systems. Heckler & Koch. Right. That is... when I used to get In Combat magazine, they rated this as the best submachine gun, the MP5.
All right.
Yeah, they use the armed forces in the UK use it as well. Right, what we got here? What's this? Barnfather.
Directed by Ken Fink. There, I didn't say that earlier, so there you go.
There was an interesting thing where, you know, G. If Barnfather had been killed, then maybe she would be promoted into the opposition, and then G would get a promotion. And G doesn't really like Barnfather.
Well, as I said before in the last episode when we discussed...
but he's not a psycho.
When you discuss that stuff, I think G has a certain amount of respect for him. He's not his favorite person, but he doesn't hate him or anything.
Yeah, he's not an INTJ. An INTJ might think like that. Might think,
Yeah, no, I don't think G was thinking... I mean, obviously there's no way to know what a fictional character...
No, he wouldn't be.
Not in the script, but I really doubt that... From what they've shown of G, I doubt he was thinking anything about that. He was thinking about how best to deal with the crisis as it happened.
No, and then also he'd have an instinct, wait a minute, I could get caught out. Because people would investigate, well, why didn't you say it? And then always kind of... Anyway, I'm being a little bit naughty. Right, so... Right, again, very good acting. By both the character and the actor, as it turned out.
Yeah.
Old school. Nice. Right. Thames, Jeff. Thames. How about Thames?
Well, you know, it does make more sense to say Thames. I mean, that's what it looks like. But I know that that's not what the original pronunciation is for whatever reason.
I wonder if there's a Thames... I wonder if... There, got mixed up now. I wonder if there's a Thames in the United States where they actually pronounce it Thames. Because it's like in... I think
It's a good question because I actually know of a sort of related but unrelated thing. Because I know of two baseball players who've been Major League Baseball players who have a name that's spelled that way. One of them pronounces it Thames and the other pronounces it Thames.
Yeah.
So
that's fair enough. And I was just wondering, because in Massachusetts, there's Gloucester, Massachusetts, and they pronounce it Gloucester, and then other people would pronounce it differently.
Yeah.
Right, so old school TV, big lettering, because, you know, not that sharp, you know, not as sharp as British TV at the time, 625 lines versus 525. I wonder if this was a real place.
It's definitely a real place. Whether or not it's actually really Homicide records, that I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe, I wonder how big they were at the time. Because that could go... Imagine what it'd be like in New York City.
Even bigger.
Yes.
Probably takes up more than one building. Or at least more than one warehouse type building.
Maybe they've gone into some... I don't know, I wonder what happened. What we got here? Jerry Stiller. Right, so his presence gives it an extra, at least an extra point. Maybe I might give it a 10 just for him. I was going to give it an 8, and then I remembered he was in it. Okay, that gives it an extra. It gives it extra points. He was right though about the bar tab, though, wasn't he? About the yeast.
This is the great thing is like it's like he says a lot of things that are right, but it was like as Mr. Morris pointed out, he's terrible at executing the things that he says are good ideas.
Oh dear, that sounds a bit like me.
Maybe so. Maybe he's an NT.
One of the things that's right is, I don't know if it's the case in the United States, but in England, real ales are very popular. and it's almost like a campaign for real ales.
Yeah,
Doing real ales.
and he was right about, like, I don't pay a lot of attention to it because I'm not a beer drinker, but like I know that in the 90s, late 90s and on, like the microbrew stuff became really popular, so he was kind of like, ahead of the trend, in that case.
People retiring from work, they would be given a beer brewing kit when they're retired. Here's your beer brewing kit. And in the UK, if you had one, I think you had to pay tax on it, especially if you had a still. Good acting from her.
Oh yeah, and that was the thing I noted as I was watching it again, is another great thing I love about Homicide is those kind of little cynical twists, cheese twists on things. And and the thing here is, it's like, oh, it's this romantic thing, oh, one last dance, and then she's like, I'm dancing with the man who just killed somebody. She's got that look on her face. So it's like this great thing that even as they try to sort of have this setup, there's that other side to it, like, hey, wait a minute.
Oh, there was a nice bit of irony when Munch complaining about somebody who is a know-it-all and talks too much.
Mm-hmm.
That was quite good. Right then, so...
Did you write down any lines from this one?
No, I didn't, because at the same time I was working out.
Okay.
I was listening, but I was working out.
I remember thinking there was one particular Munch line that you would probably write down, but and I'd get it wrong if I tried exactly, but
there was something. Yeah, I mean, I thought it was. Oh, that's a good line, but it wasn't worthy of writing down. I can't write down every good line.
Well, true, but
mind you, it would be like that.
One time I remember when I heard it again, I thought this would be one that.
But it was like that watching Star Trek Voyager for a while, where like literally for most of the episodes it would be like one or two good lines, and then for some reason they would do a comedy episode and it would be fantastic. And I was thinking, why don't it just keep it as this tone all the while? Because there's not enough conflict on the ship. They should keep it at that light comedy tone, and it suits the actual abilities of the cast to do it like that. Anyway, that's a bit of a digression. But I suggest to people that they watch Bride of Chaotica, Someone to Watch Over Me, Virtuoso, Body and Soul, those episodes of Star Trek Voyager. And don't watch the serious ones.
Okay.
But yeah, Jerry Stiller, I'm going to give it 10 out of 10 because of Jerry Stiller. I love Jerry Stiller. And wouldn't he be a funny Doctor Who? Fantastic.
Yeah.
Genius.
Well, it's no spoiler because I said this before, that this is my favorite episode of season 3. And the thing I love best about it is, like, because I like to compare and contrast with the other episode I gave a 10 out of 10 during season 3, which was Every Mother's Son. And the thing is, that episode was much more like powerful, gut-wrenching kind of drama. This one, to me, it succeeds because of all of the little awesome details in it. All the way through the thing, every detail, like, it's like, not only does it matter in some way, but even when it doesn't matter, it matters because it's part of the realism of it and what they would actually do. Because going to the records thing ends up being really a waste of time because they end up solving the case based on nothing they actually got out of that. But then Bolander, again, as to me, is a great thing because if Bayless, for instance, had a case where he had got the wrong guy, the story would be about like how it was tearing up Bayless in a morality kind of way. It would be about his guilt over it. Whereas with Bolander, it was about his detective skills. He wanted to, he's trying to come back from being shot. He's trying to prove he can still do this as a detective, and he's doubting everything about his own career based on this case from 16 years ago, where he's looking at it like, if I didn't do this one right, has my whole career been wrong? Have I made this kind of mistake too often? And how many other people have I put away that have, he has this thing where his focus is on his own abilities rather than, he never once mentions anything about, the effect on the guy's family or anything like that. It isn't even until that final scene when he's standing there and watches him go by that you even get any kind of inkling like he's sort of feeling for the guy. It was about, his own kind of competence as a detective and questioning his skills. And you have that scene with, contrast sort of with Lewis, where Lewis is kind of like, well, let it go. It already happened. And several of the other detectives, like Felton or even Pembleton, probably would have let it go faster. But in Bolander's case, he's not going to do that. But it's not because he's like, well, I've got to prove something to the family or to anybody like that. He had proved something to himself and find out what it is that he did wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Guardians that even with the STJs, is there still? Let me put it like this: STJs have more feelings than STPs because there's the feelings towards the group and what's expected of them, that sort of thing, and so they're less selfish, I suppose.
Yeah, and obviously STPs care about their skills as well, but it's in a different way. They're not. I mean, STJs are more concerned with like, we've talked about this before about their own honor, doing their duty, things like that, and so their self-worth is often very much based on what they do for work. And if they feel like they're not doing a good job at that, they feel like their life has less worth because they're not, being effective, being good at their job, doing their job right. So they feel like they lose a bit of their honor for doing that. Whereas the typical SP, if they're not, it's more like, am I enjoying the job? And if they're enjoying the job, then they're not as concerned about whether or not it's fitting anyone else's standards of doing it the right way.
I think what it is for ISTJ is my mother's an ISTJ, is that, and I think Socionics matches this quite well, and it shows a difference with INTJs. ISTJs care a lot. It's just that they're not very expressive. They care a lot though, but they don't. Yeah. They're just not facially expressive. They're very reticent to express. Whereas if you compare that with, and as Darionardi has shown with the brain, all the SJs, they sort of have an almost objective emotions, where if you put someone in front of them with a certain facial expression on their face, right, and I don't mean like those books where you have actors and actresses in doing rubbish facial expressions. I mean like proper, genuine expressions. They sort of react to it, right, and like without, even when it's out of context and they think it's their fault and things like that. So it's like inbuilt. So like I said, they're not emotionless, but they feel it, and there's a difference there with INTJ. Anyway, we're getting too much into typology, but yeah, I'd say ISTJs do care.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, and now it's been several days since I rewatched it again, but yeah, every time I watch it, I catch like another thing, and Lewis with the cheese twists and and just little stuff like that, where everything just flows together well and just sort of is crafted into this well done episode. That to me, like, there's certain episodes where if I had to say, well, give an example of what Homicide is all about, there's certain ones I could show that would do that, and I think this is a good example of that. There's obviously some episodes that are different style than this. 3 Men and Adina is another one that, very powerful episode in a totally different style, but another really well done. And Every Mother's Son, like I mentioned, same thing with, those episodes might have been more emotionally powerful. This one to me is sort of the, you said something about STs earlier. I think in a thinking kind of way, this is one of the best episodes because there's a lot of little things to catch.
Yes.
Along the way
a lot of rewatch value.
Yeah, where everything put together makes it what it is. So all the different elements, in terms of Bayless and Pembleton's case with putting together, who could have possibly wanted to kill this old woman, and
I've got a little question for you, Jeff.
Yeah, sure.
Of all the T's, of all the T types, which T's care more than the ISTJ?
Which T's care more? That's kind of a.
I mean, I would put all the NTs below ISTJ, because NTs don't really care that much.
Well, I guess it depends on what you mean by care. I mean, I think all types care about something. It's just a matter of what they care about.
Well, I mean, in terms of like people caring about people.
Well, okay. Yeah, I think NTs, especially NTJs, do have a tendency to think of people as what their function is, as opposed to as much about the individual. Can sometimes think of, because NTs do tend to think of things as systems and sets of things and stuff. So it's, people can sometimes sort of seem like just parts of a system as opposed to, human beings with, feelings and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, from that standpoint, I would say that STJs obviously are more caring about people. But I think
yeah.
NT, I don't think they're incapable of caring about people. Obviously,
no,
just they do it in a different way.
Yeah, it like in the societal norms feed into that as well, and as you said, with duty and family and these things.
Yeah, I think more than anything with SJs is they definitely believe in people having roles in society, and they fulfill a certain role, and that people have sort of their place of what their job is and what the roles they're supposed to, and that's sort of the foundation of society. And if there's a part of that that's weaker, or is not getting the job done, then that's a problem. And with ESTJs, as we've established, and what Kersey called them the supervisor type, is that they naturally gravitate towards managing or leading other people. They want to tell other people what to do, not because it's the sheer joy of telling people what to do, although some of them may have that, but it's more because they have that feeling from an early age of, if nobody takes charge, nobody else takes charge, I have to, otherwise we'll have chaos. There has to be order. I have to take charge because somebody needs to make sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing. Otherwise, everything's going to fall apart. And so they just have that natural kind of leader role, even as kids on the playground. It's like, well, if I don't take charge and say, okay, here's the game we're playing and here's how we're going to do it, then everyone's just going to run around and run into each other and never, accomplish anything or whatever. So there's that tendency, And ISTJs, I think, are more comfortable, not necessarily taking charge. They're more comfortable being sort of the cogs in the machine and the ones sort of filling in the roles that need to be filled. So they still take that very seriously in terms of whatever their position or role is.
So we could say that the STJs care about the group because the cooperative, and of course the group that involves other people. So to a certain extent, they're more directed towards other people than the NTs and STPs.
Yeah, I would say that's probably fair to say. There's that. With all SJs, there's a sense of wanting to belong to some sort of group, or sort of have a place within society, or whatever thing they're a member of. They want to be a member of something, be involved with it, and feel like they have a role in it.
And as you know, the NTs and STPs can be more selfish because They are more. Well, I mean, like, because that's where the SFPs are unusual amongst the utilitarian types, because they do care. And there's an interesting video, folks, with an interview with Kristen, where in the Model G, where I asked her, but it's where she is caring, but she doesn't want it to be seen as like an obligation.
Right. That's great. It's very consistent with the SFP mentality, because we have the SP thing of want to be free to decide what we do next, not feel obligated or burdened by anything. Yet we also naturally gravitate towards other people and want to enjoy ourselves and see other people enjoying themselves. But we don't want to feel like we're responsible for everyone else enjoying it. So it's not the role of being responsible for everybody else's well-being. We like to help people and like to make people feel good, but not feel like we have to do that. More like we have the freedom to do it when we want to do it and naturally reach out to people, as opposed to feeling like it is a duty. Because the thing I see with Guardians, especially with SFJs, is they can feel so burdened by those obligations that it seems like they go through the motions of it, and it's almost like they seem to not care as much, because it's just like they're supposed to care, so they have this sort of duty of caring. Like, oh well, I have to take care of people because that's just what I'm here for. Again, it's about like that's their role. So it doesn't seem to come from as genuine a place, even though I know it does, in a sense that it's still genuinely coming from them. But it comes across as, well, this is just what I have to do, as opposed to this is what I want to do. So you tend to hear more complaints from them. And it was interesting in this episode of Homicide, where you had Bayless and Pendleton in the car talking about, what they'll be like when they're old, and Bayless is saying, he would be, kind of frisky with in the nursing home or whatever, as opposed to just sitting around and complaining about stuff. But the funny thing about that is, I'm thinking, yeah, Bayless, he'll probably actually do more of the sitting around complaining about stuff than he thinks he will.
Yeah, that was a little bit out of character.
I didn't think it was out of character, because Bayless does have this sort of idealism where he sort of projects this idea of what he kind of wants to be, as opposed to what he really is most of the time. So I think that came out. I didn't agree with the B226 Morris about that Pendleton and Bayless were like too friendly with each other.
I didn't think that was okay.
Before, so
they're going to be friendly. They've been through a lot.
Yeah, and I liked their conversation about the first loves and the teacher and all that. Pendleton busting Bayless's little balloon about the teacher didn't know that I was doing it on purpose. And him saying, "Oh yeah, she knew," because that is another situation where I could see myself saying exactly the same thing, being like, "Yeah, she knew." So that was another good part. I liked there being a little conflict between Russert and G, establishing that they're, even though they've been friends and coworkers, now that there's a supervisory relationship, there's going to be a little bit of friction sometimes there, because they're not always going to agree on the best way to handle something.
Right. So for the the supervisor is supervised.
Right. And the thing is with supervisors, the type is that they usually are by someone, so they're very used to being, even as they're leading people, they're still subordinate to someone else, and part of their pitch to their subordinates is usually something from their own boss. It's like they pass down the chain of command.
And also, it's like ESTJs, when you're going up against an ESTJ, is you got to remember, is they've got society on their side. Mm-hmm. Because they're like enforcing the system,
right?
So they're a doubly tough proposition.
Yeah.
And so when you attack them, you attack the system. So
yeah, pretty much. I wish I could remember the munch line I was thinking of, but I never write things down. And the one time that you weren't, then I forgot. But maybe I'll watch it again later. It'll come back to me. I'll mention it.
Well, I mean, writing down lines, it takes it longer to get to, and I took long enough.
Yeah.
As it was.
It's ironic that the one time you weren't writing stuff down, I was thinking, oh well, Ben will write it down. I don't have to remember But yeah, I thought.
Maybe you could have like a little app on a device where it's like you hear a funny line, I was like, oh, say this one or whatever.
Yeah, I just haven't. I haven't done that because most of the time you've already covered it. So I was like, not even thinking about it at the time. I'm just like, yeah, that'll be something. Ben mentions Munch being very ENTP again because he makes some joke about, I can't remember, it was about the hostage situation or something, but it was something, where he sort of breaks the tension of the.
Yeah, it was a little inappropriate.
Yeah, and I can't remember exactly what he said, but
A little bit ENTP-ish.
yeah, but that's what I thought at the time. I'm like,
If it's something that would make you roll your eyes and think, yeah, ENTP, let it slide.
Yeah, like,
that's just him. That's just him.
Right. So yeah, I thought everybody was, there were a lot of great little tidbits that just kind of showed everybody's character, and then you had a great, a good guest turns by, Barnard Hughes as the old man,
yeah.
and Jerry Stiller, of course, who is, people say over and over again, there are so many outtakes that exist because of Jerry Stiller.
Yes, just seen him on the Seinfeld DVDs because he gets lines wrong.
There are times when the people working with him cannot stop laughing because he's so good.
Oh yeah,
he is so good at not doing that, but keeping a straight face.
Did you see that blooper where he couldn't?
Yeah, I've seen several. I remember Kevin James being interviewed and talking about how on King of Queens that there were so many scenes that they had to retake because he was laughing too hard at Jerry Stiller because he the way he would deliver stuff with a straight face and never break character, he cracks up everybody around him. So I have no doubt at all that while doing this Homicide episode that he probably did the same with Richard Belzer. So it'd be interesting to see outtakes from that too. But
I've got something for you folks. If you like Jerry Stiller, he did a film called The Independent about an independent movie director, and I recommend that film. The Independent, that's what it's called.
In my quest to see every movie ever made, I'll get to it.
Maybe the quest could be every Jerry Stiller.
Every Jerry Stiller, right?
What a lucky so-and-so Ben Stiller is to have Jerry Stiller as his dad.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's said several times, like, he sort of sees it as, like, I can't remember exactly any words he said, but, something to the effect of, like, he was in the shadow of him, but not in a way where he felt like, bad because of it. It was more like he just said right off the bat, I'm never going to be my father. I've got to stake out my own kind of niche for what I do, but he obviously has a tremendous amount of respect for her, and his mother as well, who has done plenty of stuff, including when the two of them were a comedy touring team for many years. So been around for quite a long time.
Yeah, I'll give it a thumbs up to Ben Stiller as well.
Yeah. So yeah, unsurprisingly, I give this one 10 out of 10. So.
And I'll give it 10 as well.
Awesome. And I think it's the best title of the season also. In Search of Crimes Past was an awesome title. So.
Even though I had to reduce the length of my title, I had a couple of, it's okay. I had to change episode to ep and take away review/spoil to review. There are some people who don't think that. They think they're going to get a review without spoilers. So that's why I put review/spoil all the while.
I mean, I can sort of understand, I guess, if somebody's thinking about things like, where a critic will review something, like a movie, and the idea is to review it, but in a way that doesn't necessarily spoil the plot. But it's kind of hard to do. It's so really, I think if you're reading something that's more than just sort of a little brief thing that kind of tells you, well, this had some good acting, or this had, if you get into what happened in the episode, it's kind of hard to not spoil stuff. So To me, it's just sort of a given that, especially when you're watching something that's, you know, a review of something that aired many years ago. You know.
So our recommendation to viewers, if we ever got one at this point, watch the movie The Usual Suspects.
Oh yeah, I recommend that one to anybody almost.
When the TV guide said a rug puller of a twist, they were exactly right.
Yeah, and the thing that I would say, without spoiling, you know, anything about it, with The Usual Suspects, if you haven't seen it, is that one thing that you can always sort of test a movie that's like that with twist ending is go back and watch it again when you know the twist and see if everything holds up. And there are some stories where it really doesn't. It kind of is, you know, you're like, well, they sort of had to just, you have to suspend disbelief pretty hard to believe that this could happen at the end. Whereas with Usual Suspects, you watch it from the beginning, knowing full well what the ending is, and everything makes perfect sense. It all falls into place. So it's a very well done story.
And Aristotle wrote that an ending must be both inevitable yet unexpected. So as you said, when you watch it a second time, oh, that's inevitable.
Right. That's to me is the real test of something like that, is how does it hold up on second viewing? Because you know, there are some movies that I enjoyed, and some television episodes, purely because I didn't know what was going to happen. And when I watch them again, I don't enjoy it quite as much because I know what's going to happen, and it doesn't hold up as well on repeated viewing. Another a movie example of that is The Day the Earth Stood Still. That's one where, to me, it's carried by the suspense, and once you know what happens, it's not nearly as interesting. And there are some Doctor Who stories like that too. There's some Doctor Who stories that hold up even with you knowing what's going to happen and all the twists of it, and there's some that once you know, it loses a big part of its appeal. So I would say the Web Planet's an example of that for me, where I still like the story, but once the suspense aspect was gone, there are parts of it that become a little bit more boring because I knew what was going to happen, and so to me, there's not as much of that anticipation quality to it.
If I were John Sullivan, who wrote Only Fools and Horses, I would be. This is relevant, Jeff. I would be furious because the ending of the Usual Suspects was in one of his episodes. It had the same ending.
That's
because because it's a parallel situation. So we don't want to give the twist away to folks, but it's a parallel situation where they're asking Kevin Spacey, who is Kaiser Soze? And they're asking Del Boy, who stole the microwave oven? And he gets immunity from prosecution. Come on, Del, give us a name. Who stole the microwave oven? I'll leave it at that, folks.
All right.
I don't want to spoil the twist.
Yeah, the one joke I'll say from that movie, because I don't mind saying in front of Morgan, because I think I've said it before, is at the beginning when verbal. So when they ask him why they call you that, and he says, because I talk too much, and he hits the first one he says, and the guy goes, yeah, I was just about to tell you to shut up. That was one of my favorite lines. But anyway, that concludes, I think, our Homicide review of In Search of Crimes Past, and a great episode. And we're running down the home stretch for season 3. Only 2 more episodes in season 3. So join us next time for Colors. And if you thought that Pemberton and Bayless were pretty chummy in the last episode, then we'll see if something will maybe bust that up a little bit. There'll be a little conflict between them, and that's a little teaser I'll give for our next story.
Ooh.
So
bye, folks.
Bye-bye.